Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
Dr. Crow from Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine joining us for another episode of Inside the Training Room. First off, Austin, I gotta ask you about your Vikings and the moves they made yesterday. Got your quarterback, and you got your edge rusher now.
Well, that's a loaded question. I got to say the quarterback flurry, shall we call it, at the top of that draft board was crazy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us saw that coming to a certain degree, but 6 guys in the first, 12 picks, I think. That was something. So, I watched a good amount of Michigan football this year. Certainly, obviously, in the playoffs, a lot of us watched. He seemed to be a good game manager, but maybe they just didn't have to call him to make the big plays, and they relied on their defense and running game. But I guess I thought that he went higher than I was expecting him to go. So I am happy we didn't draft. A lot of people projected us to trade up to 5 in draft him, so I'm glad we didn't do that. But obviously we did spend a little bit of capital to move up one spot from the Jets. And then the Turner pick, that I'm happy with. I mean, I think he is going to be a stud. So now, again, we gave up what I think third and a fourth round pick in addition to our first round swap. So definitely spent some capital on that as well, but I think he's going to be an immediate impact player in the need for us. So I like him. Especially at the quarterback position, this is going to be a move that we won't really know the answer to for a couple of years, right? But I think, mixed bag. I can't say I was super excited about the JJ, but I'm excited about Turner. So.
Awesome. All right. I think it was a good night overall for NFC North across the board. A lot of movement for NFC North teams yesterday. So,
Yeah.
All right, so I want to start off with some hoops talk. Giannis is still out. He's still listed for doubtful for tonight. He's doing a little bit more, it sounds like. Do you think there's more going on with his calf injury, or is this still kind of figure, in your opinion, a typical timeline? Because I think for a lot of us Bucks fans, we heard Dame say he was back after 8 days with a similar injury to this. This has been longer than 8 days going on. Is it still maybe because of his Achilles tendonitis, if it's on that same leg, that it could affect that? Or do you think this is pretty normal for a typical recovery time?
I don't think it's outside the window of what I'd consider atypical. And it is, especially when you have another teammate making a comment saying, I got back in X amount of time. I mean, injuries are very different. Even when they have, quote, the same injury, it's never the same injury. So I would say to say that this guy came back in 10 days and this guy in 12 and that guy in 14, it doesn't have to do with how tough you are or how quick your body's going to recover per se. It really has to do with the severity of the injury. So, looking at this is, again, well within a window what I consider normal potential recovery. Now, to your point, is it possible his Achilles tendonitis is playing a role? Absolutely. I mean, I think that's certainly going to, because as you kind of rehab the calf, the Achilles is critical in that, and if that's aggravated as well, because we don't really know how severe that was coming into it, so that could be adding a little bit of fuel to the fire. So that could slow him down a bit. But again, it's been what has it been 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's not. I mean when we see musculoskeletal injuries like this, you see a quote calf in this case. I think the soleus is what the MRI showed, which is one of the quote calf muscles. I mean, 2 weeks is definitely what I'd consider within a normal time frame.
With his teammate now, Chris Middleton, who had an ankle sprain in Game 2, he did return and he played 36 minutes in the game, but now he's listed as questionable. And Doc Rivers said yesterday there is a little bit of concern there. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, the guy played 36 minutes. Why wouldn't he be able to go here? Do you think that's just because the swelling started to pop up now for that ankle?
Yeah, probably. As you come back, it can be an up and down journey where people feel good, go out and either practice or play, and all of a sudden things flare up just a little bit. And so my guess is they've had a little bit of one of those quote setbacks. But again, that a lot of times those guys will be game time decisions as you get closer, just to see how you get out there, get moving, get some treatments on it, and just see how it feels. So those ones can have a big question mark next to them for sure.
I know this isn't in the orthopedic world, but this dropped yesterday with Joel Embiid, and he said he's been kind of dealing with Bell's palsy since the play-in tournament, and he's been playing these games here. How difficult do you think it is for him to go out there playing an NBA game when he's battling or suffering from Bell's palsy right now?
Yeah, so Bell's palsy is generally a case where you get partial paralysis of the side of the face. There's a lot of different reasons for it. By far, the most common is going to be some kind of post-viral issue. So my guess is that's what it's stemming from. I don't know why he had it. I did see that, but I didn't see why. But in either event, it generally resolves on its own. The biggest thing I would imagine would be, kind of the droop on the eye, if that would affect your vision on the court. Although, if you look at it, it doesn't look like his eye's that bad. Mm-hmm. Certainly it can affect, the muscles around your mouth, so potentially breathing as well. But he doesn't look like he has a severe, complete paralysis. So my guess is it's not actually as big a deal as it may seem. Certainly it can look a little different, but I bet it's actually not that big of a burden for him, truthfully.
Gotcha. Now going back to the NFL here, so Packers pick yesterday was Jordan Morgan, who's offensive lineman from Arizona, and I had a few people reach out to me on the X and Twitter. They didn't like it because, 2 years ago he tore his ACL. And he did play last year. He tore it in 2022. He did play last year. He played in the Senior Bowl 14 months after ACL. But there's still this narrative he tore an ACL. He's damaged goods. Why would they get a first round pick? And I don't know if it's because of the David Bakhtiari thing. We're still,
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, still nervous about that. But the fact that he played a season on it, he played in the Senior Bowl and all that. He's got to be good with that, right?
Yeah, and so the recovery following ACL reconstruction is a very high rate of success. So if people have a relatively straightforward ACL, and we don't have to do a big meniscectomy or a cartilage injury that goes along with it, the success rate from that is very high. And so even with some of those other injuries, we still actually have a pretty solid success rate. So now, I can tell you one thing, that they did their due diligence. I mean, these teams, when they're thinking about drafting these guys, they will do physical exams, they will do MRIs, and so they're going to see, and they're going to say, look, the graph looks good, the cartilage looks good, the menisci look good. If that's the case, that leg is, you never want to say 100%, but about as close to it as you can be. So, and especially with the season under your belt, to see how it's responded, I honestly, there's so many athletes that have come back from ACLs that I don't want to say it's just routine, but when they do well, it is the point where you can kind of put that in the back burner and say, I don't think that's going to be an issue for him in his career.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you heard this or knew about this. So, the Colts drafted, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Latu from UCLA, Leah Latu. There was a story that he had a neck injury, and he was actually medically could not play. They wouldn't clear him in 2020. They wouldn't clear him in 2021 due to that neck injury. And then he ends up getting cleared, and he comes back and he plays, and now he's a first-round pick. I even think they said on the broadcast it was Peyton Manning's doctor is the one who cleared him, and we know Peyton Manning had that neck injury there. But
yeah,
is there? The fact that he plays edge rusher and he had those neck issues there. I know last week I asked you if you were a team physician and you're looking at guys, would there be anything that would worry you with an injury like that? Would that be something that really would concern you drafting him that high?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the question is why was he not cleared? Mm-hmm. But yeah, for sure. Necks and back injuries like that, they are a big red flag because, those can be unfortunately career-ending, and we've seen that too many times with athletes in football. So, does he have congenital stenosis, so narrowing of the neck? Did he have a pinched nerve that was causing weakness and a radiculopathy? Some of those things are things that can go away and go away completely. Some are just the way you're built. So, for example, congenital stenosis, where you just have narrowing of the neck, those guys are just more prone to having stingers or even potentially transient quadriplegia, where they get hit and go paralyzed for a second, which is about as scary as it gets. If it was something like that, he likely wouldn't have got cleared back. So my assumption, it was something more like a temporary condition, but if he had a year or two that it was affecting him, I honestly don't know the full backdrop to that, but at least the initial story you're telling me, I have to imagine that it had to do something with a nerve that was being affected, which resulted in weakness, which is why they wouldn't clear him. And then if he was cleared, that means that it did resolve. So did he ever have surgery on that? Do you know? Did they say that, or did it just resolve?
I haven't seen. So I don't know if you know Dr. Robert Watkins. Does that name kind of ring a bell? I'm reading a little bit here.
Okay.
Yeah, it said that Watkins cleared him to return to football after a battery of tests, but Washington would still not clear him to play for the Huskies, and that's why he transferred to UCLA. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
he did have surgery. He did have surgery, neck fusion surgery, to try to repair lingering numbness.
There you go. So yeah, he probably had a radiculopathy that caused a focal weakness, and a lot of times that's one of the criteria we use for getting athletes back after any kind of injury to the neck is like you have to have full strength. So it's possible that lingered for a while, and if it resolved, but I mean, I will tell you that's a red flag. I mean, it's just, you don't want to just scratch a guy off and say, hey, there's no chance he'll ever make it, but you definitely worry about another injury. With the level fused, he's certainly going to be at higher risk for issues with the what we call adjacent levels. So let's say there was a C4-5, you were about 3-4, and then also 5-6 on the other side of it. So, they must feel good about it. He clearly has upside because he was a productive player, no doubt about that. So, I would say that is a roll of the dice. Their medical staff must have felt happy about where he was at, but it's going to be something that I'm sure affected his draft stats. A guy that maybe could have went higher, but that probably scared some teams off.
Yeah. Last one for you here, Austin. So baseball, Wade Miley, Brewers pitcher Wade Miley, he's back on the injured list, and it's for what they're calling elbow inflammation. He says, though, because apparently he's been battling bone spurs in that elbow for a while now, he says this feels different than a bone spur. So when I hear elbow inflammation on your throwing elbow and you're a pitcher, I start to get a little bit worried about that, and especially when he says it feels different than bone spurs, which he's been dealing with for a while.
Yeah. So bone spurs are kind of a nebulous term that we use for any kind of projection off of a bone that's not maybe necessarily normally there. Sometimes they can be anatomic variant. Sometimes they can be related to phenomena in the elbow. Kind of to bring it back to what you're alluding to, the old UCL or Tommy John ligament. One of the signs of chronic partial tearing of the UCL. So what happens is the UCL opens up. So as they throw, the inner part of the elbow opens up, and the olecranon, which is kind of the tip of your elbow, will shift over medially and can rub and cause some spurs there. So that's kind of a classic test question that we'll get is if you see spurring there, what are you worried about? That you get worried about the UCL. So if he has that constellation of issues going on, it certainly has to raise the red flag of like, is it potential that we're dealing with something more serious than just a little bit of inflammation that we're actually dealing with? Not the inflammation is not there; it's there. It's just, is it coming from a bigger problem? And so I can imagine that if this becomes a recurrent issue, he may be looking at potentially a procedure to either clean up those spurs, if that's all that it is, or unfortunately, if it is those spurs coming from a UCL problem, then you're looking at a Tommy John type procedure.
Man, good stuff as always, man. We appreciate you hopping on, and I was gonna say good luck today for round 2, but I don't think you have any picks today for round 2. So
no, I don't think. Yeah, we are. I think we expended this year and next year, so we're gonna be. But I think if you like your guy and you want to go for him, I mean, I keep my finger on the pulse of a lot of Viking chatter, and some people are upset about that. But if you hit big on a draft pick, it's worth a couple picks. It really is. Now, of course, if you swing and miss and spend a couple picks, that's a big error. So, I think at this point we're starting to get to the spot where our GM and head coach are, they're still young, but I think at some point now we got to get to the spot where they got to start producing, and now they're starting to. These are moves that are going to make and break careers. So. I certainly hope it's making them, not breaking them.
Right.
But, time will tell.
Absolutely. All right, dude. We appreciate it as always, buddy, and we'll catch up with you again soon. Have a fantastic weekend, okay?
Yeah. Take care, Dan.
You got it. There you go. Dr. Crow, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine inside the training room.